good evening to you both. And let's begin with the return of the greatest outdoor show on earth, and kicking it off, a very familiar face.
This is so wonderful. It really is an honor. And the spirit of the West is alive and well here in Calgary.
Country music icon Shania Twain took to the saddle as this year's Calgary Stampede Parade Marshal, kicking off 10 days of festivities. And with last year's attendance setting a new record at nearly 1.5 million, there's plenty riding on the success of this year's Stampede for many in the business community.
For so many of them, this is the majority of their revenue for the year. This is absolutely critical for Calgary, and I think as long as the weather holds, I think we're going to have a really, really good 10 days.
Now, returning this year to contend with huge crowds, metal detectors, and bag searches.
If you wouldn't bring something onto an airplane, please don't bring it to Stampede Park.
And new this year, Calgary Police flying drones, a carryover from the recent Kananaskis Leaders Summit.
We have obtained through G7, we've got some more toys, and we'll be putting those to use at Stampede. We'll be flying the drones overhead to help us monitor, just like with the helicopter.
Anti-ramming barriers have also been installed to prevent the entry of unauthorized vehicles. Now, Alex, you're in Calgary, so what's your read on the party atmosphere driving this year's Stampede? Is this the one to top them all?
I think they aim for that every year. I checked the weather this morning just out of curiosity, and it looks like it's going to be a beautiful 10 days. So, you know, barring anything unforeseen, it looks like it's going to be a good one for Stampede.
Tyler, what do you make of this year's emphasis on security with increased police presence, even the carryover of tech from the G7 summit?
As a general principle, I'm opposed to it. I think that we've gone much too far in terms of sort of this surveillance of public events and this sort of security theater stuff that we see happening. I mean, certainly putting up barriers to prevent unauthorized vehicles is one thing, but flying drones over people having a good time is a totally different thing, in my opinion. But you know, I'm the sort of person who thinks you should be able to get onto an airplane roughly the same as you get onto a bus. So take that for what it's worth. But I certainly think it's excessive. It's an absolutely excessive approach to security, and it's an absolutely excessive treatment of the people of the city of Calgary and treatment of the people who are visiting Stampede. This event has worked for 75 years, and there were no drones at the first time around, or even last year, the year before. So, I mean, no, it's absurd. I mean, police are going to use whatever tools and technology and toys that they have. I mean, the fact that they refer to them as toys in that little clip says, I think, quite a bit about the perception that law enforcement has of these things.
And you were in Calgary in southern Alberta for the G7 summit. How do you see that tech being carried over? Is it as simple as the drones flying overhead?
Well, yeah, to some extent it is. I mean, I think that you would have people in Calgary probably expressing some degree of outrage if they had police forces acquiring all this stuff for the sole purpose of surveilling people at Stampede. It makes sense, of course, that you're going to have some of this carryover from it. If you've acquired these things for something else, of course, you're going to use them. It's give a man a hammer and everything looks like a nail, right? If they didn't have these tools in the first place, it strikes me as unlikely that they would be going this route now.
Now, Alex, as always, there will be a full court press by provincial, municipal politicians. Prime Minister Carney is expected to be there. Pierre Poilievre was in the parade this morning. Of course, a Conservative leader on the campaign trail, seeking a seat now in the Battle River Crowfoot by-election. How prominent a role do you expect politics to play at this year's Stampede?
I think it's going to be big. I mean, as those of us in the media know, there's kind of regular Stampede with the rides and the rodeo and the fun stuff. And then there's Shadow Stampede, which is, a full schedule of political events, of politicians getting out, answering questions. They got to wear the hat. They got to flip the pancakes. That's a big part of every Stampede every year. But I think this year in particular, a lot of us have this mindset that the election is over, that, we've moved past. It was a month ago now. But for Poilievre, it really hasn't. He's been back on the campaign trail. He's been out in Battle River Crowfoot. He's been talking to people, going to Canada Day events. For him, it really it continues. It keeps going. It's going to be a big one for him. And with Carney being a new prime minister, he's going to be in the hot seat as well. So that side of things I'm expecting is going to be very, very busy. I think too, and just on the security point, I did just want to point out too that I get that they've all been gifted these new security tools from the G7. But at the same time, I think as a result of things like the Lapu Lapu Festival, where there was a horrific attack in Vancouver just a couple of months ago, I do want to say that I think there probably is a little bit of a sense that the security needs of a major public event like this have changed probably in the last few decades, warranting a little bit of a different level of concern.
All right. On the politics side, the Premier took in a town hall meeting in Okotoks Wednesday evening ahead of heading to Calgary for the Calgary Stampede. And it wasn't without drama, as many in attendance were there to voice disapproval.
I just want to make sure that the Premier knows that I'm just about done with the divisive politics and to get her back to basics of running the province.
Transgender rights, because I am, and I went through high school. And I had a lot of really good teachers and a lot of really good support, but I also had a lot of really nasty pushback in a lot of different places. And I don't think kids deserve to go through that when they're already going through the worst time ever.
Now, about 30 lined up for a turn at the microphone. And while there were questions on sovereignty, policing, healthcare, it was pushback on coal mining policies that dominated.
They're just not listening to us. The UCP is not listening to us. We've been campaigning against the Grassy Mountain coal mine.
I want to hear from the Agriculture Minister his concerns around the water quality in Alberta.
And it left the Premier to defend her government's decisions.
But we have to figure out how to develop resources in an environmentally sustainable way. If we want to get ourselves weaned off the Americans as our sole customer, we have to become a lot more independent. We've got to have a lot more opportunities to develop new markets, and that's what some of these products are going to allow us to do.
The Okotoks event was independent of the recently announced Alberta Next town hall. Tyler, was this an outlier, or might it be a reflection of some of what the Smith government can expect as it hits the road this summer to consult with Albertans?
I expect it's going to reflect, or is reflective of what they're going to hear. This government is fighting a number of different constituencies on a number of different fronts. I mean, for a lot of time in Alberta, you've sort of urban issues versus rural issues, and you do still have very wide-ranging support in rural areas for the UCP, and certainly in some urban areas as well. The complicating factor here is you've got a set of issues that are of concern to urban voters, and you have a set of issues that are also of concern to rural voters, the Grassy Mountain coal mine being the most obvious example. So, and when they get into the Alberta Next panel, they're going to be dealing with a bunch of things that are not popular anywhere in the province, like a provincial police force and like an Alberta pension plan. So no, I expect it's going to be reflective of what they hear over the course of the summer. Does that translate into any change in electoral fortunes? Does that change into any change into, the popularity of the Premier, things like that? No, I mean, on sort of cross province wide, I don't think so, but I would expect them to hear some pretty pungent feedback over the course of the summer.
Well, and Alex, on that point, whether it's the barbecue circuit or meetings with the Alberta Next panel, what are the topics you expect to dominate discussions as the politicians make the rounds?
I think it's going to be some of these hot button issues like the pension, like the police force, like the Grassy mine, dare I say it, like separatism. I mean, as Tyler alluded to, there is kind of a rural-urban divide here, but then there's also a divide between, kind of the party's more passionate supporters and the rest of Alberta. We know that polling suggests that a lot of things are very deeply unpopular when it comes to the rest of the province. But the calculus that the government seems to be making is that it is kind of a relatively narrow base of passionate supporters who put them in power and presumably who will keep them in power. And so that is some of the math they seem to be doing, is that, if they can keep these folks happy, they will continue to be in government. But again, that does require then going out and talking to people for whom these issues are very, very unpopular. So, some of these things I think we're going to hear a lot about as the summer goes on.
Over the next 5 years, downtown Calgary will have a very different skyline. That's because new JW Marriott and W hotels will be built side by side near Stampede Park, and they will be tall, overtaking the current largest tower, Brookfield Place East, at 56 stories, along with upscale luxury, hotel rooms and residents. There will also be restaurants, spas, meeting spaces, and more. They will also be separate from the hotel already announced for McLeod and 17th Ave Southeast, which will be known as Autographed by Truman.
We've always had the people, we've always had the hospitality. Having the places to allow larger and more frequent gatherings is a game changer for us, especially on our path to be Canada's leading convention destination.
The first of the 3 new hotels expected to open in 2028. Alex, private investment with this, something like $1.5 billion. What do you expect developments of this nature to mean for not only Calgary's culture and entertainment district, but maybe the city in general?
You know, I would say for the last 5 years or so, it's felt like the dominant narrative about Calgary's downtown has been the vacancy rate, specifically the fact that so many business towers, so many offices have been sitting empty. And we're talking about hotels here. We're not talking about office towers. But at the same time, coming off a real streak of time when the narrative has really been about kind of the malaise, the lack of vibrancy, the lack of development that has really been plaguing Calgary's downtown, something that I think a lot of cities can relate to coming out of COVID. This feels like a little bit of turning the page. It speaks to a little bit of new investment, new vibrancy, new life for Calgary's downtown. I'm personally of the opinion that the phrase world-class city should never, ever be used. But I do think at a time when Calgary is really, looking to put itself on the map, stuff like this feels like, maybe a change in the conversation.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Tyler, putting it on the map. So what's this say to you about the direction Calgary's headed? Its stature among heavyweight North American cities.
It certainly speaks to a degree of ambition, which is, I think, as Alex sort of suggested, probably a good thing for Calgary or Edmonton. I mean, there is always the risk that these things are going to flop. There's some big towers in Edmonton that have residences and hotels in them that are sitting with pretty significant vacancy rates because people don't want to live in a 500 square foot condo for, $600,000 or something like that. So, it's always, I think, a bit of a gamble, especially given sort of the shaky footing that the economy is on right now, and questions very much alive at the moment about what the Canadian economy and the Alberta economy are going to look like going into the future. But, private money tends to some extent have a good grasp on these things. And so the fact that they're willing to put this money up, make this bet on Calgary is, I think, sort of an overwhelmingly positive sign for the city.
All right, so from Calgary skyscrapers reaching new heights to Calgarians landing on a unique list, World UFO Day, observed annually on July 2nd, drawing believers to scour the skies. And while there's often a logical explanation for many sightings, several remain unsolved.
Any interest anybody ever has in looking at the sky, I want to talk about it.
And on World UFO Day, stargazers had lots to say. Canada Sports Betting compiled data from the National Unidentified Flying Object Centre and figures the odds of being abducted by aliens are highest in Toronto. There you saw it, Calgary in second, and then Vancouver.
For me, I think maybe the aliens are fans of skiing. I know you guys, they could be fans of skiing. I know I've got a friend who lives in Vancouver and he says there's a lot of weird, wonderful, colourful folk living there.
Well, that list was compiled for fun. There are those in Western Canada who swear they've experienced a close encounter, some drawing international attention in years past.
What I saw was 5 sets of eyeballs. And there was one that was closer to us on the side of the road, and 4 were behind this gate.
All the observations that we ever see are by chance observations, and science cannot be done with by chance observations.
NASA now has an independent commission that investigates what it calls unidentified anomalous phenomena in a bid to bring science into the equation. Tyler, what are your thoughts on why Calgary might register on the list of Canadian cities with highest odds of being abducted by aliens? Could skiing factor into the equation?
Probably it's all the beer that people drink at Stampede every year, wandering home and think they've been abducted. I think it probably makes sense that Vancouver, Calgary, and Ottawa or in Toronto are the top of the list, just given population densities in those places. If you've got X% of the population that claims to have UFO encounters or sightings, then the higher population parts of the country are going to be up towards the top of the list. So I think that's probably the simplest explanation of what is going on here.
All right, Alex, beyond lighthearted lists, betting odds, where does it register on your radar?
Oh boy. I would be remiss, I feel like, if I didn't point out the fact that these sports betting sites put out all sorts of weird odds on things in the hopes of getting PR. So, I mean, kudos to them for it working this time. But the last one of theirs I saw was their odds on the Pope dying, but they had the wrong Pope. So we probably shouldn't confuse enthusiasm for attention with like actual expertise on things. But at the same time, while I think these things are, shall we say, junk science, I think people are allowed to be curious. People are allowed to look up and wonder what's going on. And so I think it is cool that, scientists and NASA are getting involved here, because I think it can be easy to just dismiss people as, believing in conspiracies. But I think it's fair for people to wonder. And I think it's cool that science is trying to reach that and reach out with information and with actual data for people that are curious.
Indeed. Okay. On that note, we'll leave it there. Hope you have a great weekend. Thank you both.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.